co-host to do that?
No, I can do that without making you a co-host. There you go. You should be able to do that now.
Oh, so I can share my screen.
Yes.
Okay.
And I have just turned on the recording.
Oh, you're going to record. Great. Wonderful.
Yes.
In that case, let us go ahead and start with some silent worship. Well, thank you again, friends, for showing up. I was confessing to Rick earlier that I am very nervous. Even though I'm among friends, I'm really nervous. This is my first presentation. One thing, introducing myself, I also want to again introduce Mallory Kremen. She's going to be helping out. So if people, she's waving. If some people want to put a question in the chat, you could do that. She's going to be monitoring that. Also, Jeannie, I don't know when we get to the end if people will want to use the hands raised function for questions, but if you could monitor that for me, because I don't know how busy I'm going to be trying to share my screen. But actually, that's what I'm going to do right now.
I'd be happy to do that. And so at the end, if friends have questions, click on the participants list and you'll see the list of participants off to the side. And then there will be a blue hand. And if you click on that, that means that you want to ask a question.
Yeah. And if you could mute yourself while during the presentation, that would be great. So let's see here. Oops. I guess let me try this again. I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully when I go to slideshow. So is everybody seeing a slide with my name and the city of Berkeley and myself standing by the Russian River up in Northern California?
Yes.
Everybody?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, great. Well, then we're ready to go. And once again, my name is Tom Yamaguchi. I'm been a member of Strawberry Creek meetings since the 90s. I'm currently transferring my membership to Berkeley and appreciate everybody from all our local congregations showing up for this presentation. I am also a volunteer for Citizens Climate Lobby. So I mentioned before, this is my first presentation. It's something I've wanted to give for a long time. It was actually scheduled for last March 15th. And because of COVID, that didn't happen. But I will be talking about the handout. Actually, what happened was we had got a copy of this handout from the Friends Committee on National Legislation of the various bills that were up then, and I volunteered to do that. So as I said, things with COVID sort of derailed things for a while, but now I feel confident enough to try to do this on Zoom. So we'll see what happens, and we'll be talking about not only that FCNL handout, but I also wanted to talk about the contrast with the state of California's cap and trade program. And also something that's come up this fall is that we actually have a couple of local ballot measures in Berkeley and Albany that are also going to be a way of putting a price on carbon emissions. And I just felt a need to talk about that. So I've added that to the talk as well. So one of the things before we go on is, because I sort of have a lengthy presentation, what I'm not going to talk about, and that is the causes in global warming, and all the horrible things and the bad news. We always, as Quakers, we know what the bad news is. We know what the cause of global warming is. What we're looking at now is not only the solutions, but how we can talk about those solutions to not only each other, but to non-friends. So that's basically what I'm gearing my presentation for. One of the things I wanted to talk before that is how I came to my own climate activism. And basically my own activism regarding energy and climate goes back to the 1970s when I was during the energy crisis that we had then. And I became very interested in sustainable energy, particularly regarding transportation. So I became a very avid bicyclist, became very interested in public transportation, getting to shift away from our dependence on private cars. One of the things, right now, this is a picture of me and another volunteer at one of our local bike to work days. So I've been a volunteer for local bicycle organizations as well. And one of the things that during my early activism was my interest in a concept called peak oil. And that was basically the theory that the world was running out of oil. And so with that, I sort of have a confession regarding the climate issue. And that is, I'm really sort of consider myself late to this issue. And a part of it was because I was a believer in the peak oil theory. I thought, hey, world's running out of fossil fuels. We're going to have to convert to sustainable sources. So, that'll take care of that. There'll be no problem. We won't have to worry about global warming. Well, a couple decades back, I went to a conference in San Francisco and ran into a couple of climate scientists there and asked them, what should I be more concerned about, global warming or peak oil? And they said, you know what? We're going to run out of atmosphere long before we run out of fossil fuels. And as it turned out, they're right. We are constantly discovering new sources of fossil fuels. Fracking has made finding natural gas a lot easier, and so yeah, we need to deal with climate the climate crisis, and that's why I'm here. So I want to talk about how I got to actually what I consider my niche in climate activism. A few years ago, I went to the St. John's Presbyterian Church in South Berkeley, where I heard from Dr. Catherine Hayo, and she basically, I was just so impressed. I actually started by volunteering with Citizens Climate Lobby because of her, and I realized, as I said, where are my niches? Dr. Hayo, she's a Canadian, but she's also teaches at Texas Tech, and she is a climate scientist, and she's also an evangelical Christian. And so I went to her to hear her, and she was talking about values and how we can bring our values to the climate debate. And I said, that's it. As a person of faith, this is what I can do. I can talk about values. I can talk about, because I'm not a scientist. I know very little about science, but I can talk about values and to people of faith, and that's what I'm doing. Hopefully now, and will hopefully continue to do that. So once again, I'm going to just say what I'm not going to talk about. That's the climate, the causes of climate change. As I said, we know all about that. But I did want to just talk about, as I said, when we talk about climate to other people, what is helpful. And for me personally, I think what is helpful, especially when we talk about the differences between climate and weather. First of all, there are some people we can't talk to. There are people whose minds will not be changed, whether they're just so thoroughly confused that they don't know the difference between climate and weather, or they're just so stubborn. They just will not listen. But I believe that there are people that can and are listening if we just give them the right message. And so one of the things I've been thinking about in terms of how I deliver my message is I like metaphors. And so if I'm talking to non-friends about especially the contrast of what's weather and climate change, one metaphor I like to think of, excuse me, is the loaded dice. And basically, if we look at different weather events as combinations of the rolls of the dice, we keep rolling the dice. We're just going to keep getting different numbers. There's not going to be a pattern. But let's just say we load the dice just the tiniest bit. Then, as we keep rolling the dice, we see these patterns develop. And with climate change, or with the introduction of greenhouse gases, it's not only just loading the dice once, but constantly loading more and more and more, so that we're actually seeing these patterns develop. And those patterns are already in view. Talking about this morning during Berkeley meeting for worship, that the Gulf Coast is preparing for another severe tropical storm. So we got the tropical storms that are becoming more frequent and heavy. Of course, we've had tropical storms, we've had hurricanes for as long as the Earth has been in existence, or at least the seas have been in existence. But the pattern is it's getting more and more and more that these are becoming more frequent and more intense. So that's what I call the loaded dice. I should also mention I asked Catherine Hayhoe if she had a good metaphor. She introduced one concept of the forest and the trees. So if you think of the trees as the individual weather events, then forest represents the climate. And of course, we know what's happening with climate change and what it's doing to our forests. So I wanted to talking about now about getting into the meat of what we're talking about, and that is regarding the climate pricing, what we call these market solutions to the climate crisis. And I want to talk with the concept of an externality. And basically, as you can see here, this is a concept that economists use. Once again, I'm not an economist, but it's a cost or benefit that affects a third party who didn't choose to incur those costs or benefits. And it's in itself, an externality is not necessarily good or bad. There can be good examples and bad examples. One bad example, once again, is those manufacturing activities that cause air pollution, and then all the rest of it we pay through our health costs and the cleanup costs. On the other hand, vaccinations provide benefits to people who are not vaccinated. What we call that herd immunity. So as he said, externality is something that we need to consider with the fact that we're pumping all these greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and we're all paying the price, whether we're paying for the price of the oil or the coal or whatever. We're all paying the price. Somebody's got to pay that price. And who's going to pay for it? Is it going to be for the people with insurance? Their insurance costs are going to go up to pay for the damage from the hurricanes and the wildfires and such? Or is it going to be the taxpayers paying for the crumbling infrastructure as a result of rising sea levels and windstorms and stuff like that? So the question is, somebody's going to pay. And if we don't do something, it'll cost a lot of money. So probably the best thing is to do is if we're paying it up front, the costs are going to be cheaper in the long run. So paying for preventing that carbon going into the atmosphere in the long run is going to be cheaper than actually pay for the cleanup costs. So now I would like to go ahead and talk about the cap and trade program, and just here's a little bit of thing from the Environmental Defense Fund I found on their website that just gives a basic overview. One thing, the government sets up a cap across a given industry, ideally the whole economy, and it decides the penalties for violations. The total amount of the cap is split into allowances, each permitting a company to emit a ton of emissions. The government distributes those allowances to the companies, either for free or through an auction. The cap typically declines over time, providing a growing incentive for industry and business to reduce their emissions more efficiently while keeping the production costs down. Companies can cut their pollution faster than can sell allowances to companies that pollute more or bank them for future use. And finally, this market or trade part of the cap and trade gives companies the flexibility in increasing the pool of available capital to make reductions, and encourages companies to cut pollution faster, rewards innovation. And this is something that's been done before on other types of pollution, particularly straight air pollution. It has worked in the past, and California, oops, I need to advance my slide. Where am I? Okay, oops. Okay, let's see. Oh, right. I guess there, okay. So I'm missing a slide here. Well, anyway. But at any rate, just talk about California's cap and trade. And that was through, oh, excuse me, while I take a drink of water here.
Tom, it did come up on the screen, but then it went away. California cap and trade was right there on my screen. And then now I'm on externality. One there, right there.
Okay,
there
yeah.
It went back.
Yeah, that's okay. That's fine. That's
okay.
That's okay. Anyway, so AB 32 was signed up in law in 2006 by then Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, and its goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to 1990 levels by the year 2020, which is this year. It authorized the collection of a fee from sources of greenhouse gases, such as oil refineries and electrical power plants. And basically, as I said, this is basically the mechanism that does that. And as I said, this is from the Environmental Defense Fund, which pretty much helped design and implement the cap and trade program. And it has reduced our emissions by 10% between the program's launch in 2013 and in 2018, or actually, yeah, between 2013 and 2018. And it has been extended, but the passage in 2016 has been extended and has raised the goal for greenhouse gas emissions to 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. So as I said, it's collecting a lot of money from these energy companies, and that money currently is being used to do different things. One of them is to fund household energy efficiency upgrades, also land preservation and restoration, public transit, particularly our high-speed rail program, that's getting a lot of money from our cap and trade money. And then twice a year, utility customers, gas electric customers, receive a climate credit on their bills. So you'll notice that twice a year, you'll get a reduction or climate credit. So that is basically the basics of cap and trade. Now I want to go ahead and talk about that handout. I've just got the first page displayed here, but the whole handout is about 3 pages. As you can see at the bottom, the date is September 27th, 2019. So that's almost a year old. And as you know, probably now we're coming close to the end of our legislative session. And so most likely these bills that we're talking about today will need to be reintroduced. So the FCNL handout here lists 7 bills, and they have things in common, they have things that are different. And FCNL has not taken a position on any of these, but they've provided this comparison list so that we can decide what is the best way to go. And so one of the first bills on the list is actually the one that's supported by the Citizens Climate Lobby, or CCL, and that's HR 763, which is called the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. It is a bipartisan bill sponsored by Ted Deutsch and Francis Rooney. And one of the things that these bills have in common and have different is some of them are bipartisan bills, and some of them are Democratic only bills. So this one, as I said, is a bipartisan bill. In the past years, there have been at least one bill I think of that might have been a Republican-sponsored bill. And I think it was Corbello, who unfortunately is no longer in the House. He was a Republican from Florida, and he had a bill. And he was also one of the first members of the Climate Solutions Caucus. That, as I said, unfortunately, he is no longer in the Congress. But as I said, some of these bills are bipartisan and some of them are Democratic only. So as I said, this is pretty much, very much in line with what Citizens Climate Lobby has been trying to get into enacted. It sets a price on carbon that is at the source. So as the energy companies, like the miners, the oil companies, the mine companies, all those produce the fuel, that carbon is taxed, and also anything that's shipped in, anything that comes in from abroad also gets taxed. And the tax starts in the first year, it starts at $15 per metric ton. And then each year, that tax is increased $10 per ton. So it goes from 15 to 25 to 35. And there are exemptions, particularly there are exemptions for agricultural and for the armed forces or the military. So those are exemptions to that. There also, the revenue is placed in what's called the Carbon Dividend Trust Fund, and then equally distributed to all the taxpayers, with a half share going for each child under 19. So that's the dividend part of the fee and dividend. So we have a fee on emissions and a dividend back to consumers.
Is that, Tom, is that the incentive to decrease carbon emissions is the cost, the fee?
Yes, yes, that is indeed. Yes, the idea is as the cost goes up, people will want to conserve or use less in order to spend less. So that's why it's called a market solution. Thanks for bringing that up. So there is also some changes regarding regulation. The EPA, or Environmental Protection Agency, will not be allowed to regulate greenhouse gas emissions. However, no other regulations regarding air pollution or energy efficiency standards are affected. So it's only the greenhouse gas emissions that will be out of EPA's regulation. However, also, if the emission goals are not met after 10 years, EPA would be directed by Congress to regulate those emissions to achieve those targets. So the goal there is to decrease emissions by 40% below the 2016 levels in 12 years. And ultimately, the bill seeks to reduce emissions by 90% by 2025 or 2050. Excuse me.
May I ask one more quick question?
Sure.
In many cases in industries, the fines that are levied for not meeting the goals are simply written off as a cost of doing business. How is that avoided here?
I don't, well, there's no fines involved. I mean, people, they just pay the tax. The tax will be paid. You know, I don't know if there's what you're talking about is a fine for tax evasion.
Well,
I don't know.
the
Seems, you know
cost,
what, Paul, you know what, let me research that
Right.
for you, because I don't
Okay.
have an answer for that.
okay,
But as
Okay.
I said, you know, pretty much it's a straight tax. It's not like a regulation where if somebody, you know, does something that they're supposed to do,
Yeah.
you know, they're supposed to pay a fine or whatever. We're talking about a different mechanism, which is basically a straight tax or fee. But I will verify that for you and get
thank
back to
you.
you. Okay, sure, thanks. So yeah, so that's, as I said, that's the 763. The next bill that we're looking at is S1128, which is the American Opportunity Carbon Fee Act. This is a Democratic-only bill sponsored by Sheldon Whitehouse. It starts with $52 per metric ton in the first year, increasing by 6% plus inflation each year. So this would give workers a tax credit equal to 6.2% of their earned income for $900, as well as payments to Social Security beneficiaries and other retired and disabled Americans. In addition to that, $10 billion would be given to state grants to fund transition to low carbon economies, including energy assistance programs, job training, and worker transition assistance. So this is sort of a hybrid where you're talking about not only returning money to the consumer or taxpayer, as well as an investment in programs, into government programs. And as I said, its goal is to reduce emissions by 51% by 2029, below the 2005 levels. Okay. Moving on, we have 4058, HR 4058, the Stemming Warming and Augmenting Pay Act, or SWAP. That prices carbon at $30 per ton, starting at 2021, increasing by 5% plus inflation each year. So the price will automatically increase an additional $3 per ton every 2 years if emissions reductions are behind those goals. 70% of the revenue would reduce payroll taxes, 10% to Social Security beneficiaries, 20% to create a carbon trust fund for state block grants, assistance to low-income families, climate adaptation, and energy efficiency program. There would be a 12-year moratorium on greenhouse gas regulation by the EPA, same as similar to 763, and which would be lifted if the targets are not met after 4 and 8 years. So if the targets aren't met, then EPA can come in and regulate. Its goal is to reduce carbon pollution by approximately 41% under 2000 levels by 2013. Moving on to the fourth bill. There's my cursor. There's my cursor. And I'm going to take another drink here. The next bill is the HR, S2284, HR 4051, or the Climate Action Rebate Act. This is a Democratic bill sponsored by Chris Coons, Dianne Feinstein, and Jimmy Panetta. People hear our dog barking in the background. But anyway, like the 763, it'll price carbon at $15 per ton in the first year and increasing $15 per ton each year. If those emissions targets are not met in a given year, the fee is raised from $15 to $30 a ton for each year. It creates a carbon action rebate fund with 70% of the revenues going as a dividend to low and middle income families, 20% for infrastructure and climate adaptation, 5% for energy innovation, and 5% for transitional assistance for workers and other affected by high energy costs. So that is, once again, a combination of returning to the consumer is also reinvesting, also compensating workers, which 763 does not do. The 3966, which is our fifth bill, the Raise Wages and Cut Carbon Act. This is a bipartisan bill. Dan Lipinski and Francis Rooney are their sponsors. $40 per ton is the cost for the first year in terms of carbon per ton. And it increases 2.5% plus inflation each year. So there's a slowly increase in the price of carbon until the US achieves an emissions level of 20% of our 2005 emissions level. 84% of those revenues would offset the payroll tax, 10% for Social Security beneficiaries, 5% for the low-income energy assistance program, and 1% for the weatherization program. It also prevents the EPA from regulating greenhouse gas emissions until 2030, and every 5 years afterwards, if the targets are not met, they will be able to regulate that. And then HR 4142, the America Wins Act. This is a Democratic-only bill. $52 per ton for carbon, starting in 2021 and increasing at 6% plus inflation each year. It reduces emissions by 52% in 10 years with zero emissions by mid-century. And the revenue will be used to create a Build America Trust Fund for over 10 years, and we'll spend $1.2 trillion for infrastructure, $70 billion for transition assistance, and $900 billion for energy assistance to low-income Americans. It mandates funding for clean energy and innovation and resiliency. HR 4520 is the last one on the FCNL list, and this is a bipartisan bill. The sponsors are Brian Fitzpatrick, and I'm going to mess up this guy's name, Salud Carbajo, and Francis Rooney and Scott Peters. That price for carbon will be $35 per ton starting in 2021 and increasing by 5% plus inflation every year. Every 2 years, if the emission reductions are not met, the price will increase by an additional $4 per ton. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuel by 36% below 2005 levels by the year 2025. That's the goal. And it creates a rebuilding infrastructure and solutions for the environment or RISE trust fund. 70% of the revenues will go to the Highway Trust Fund for infrastructure, 10% for state grants for low-income households, and 20% for climate mitigation programs such as flood control and worker retraining. So once again, just the comparisons. Also, all of them do have exemptions or rebates for carbon emissions by sequestration, reuse, carbon capture and storage. They all include what's called a border adjustment. And once again, this is a concept that economists have come up with, so that if any products that come in from another country that don't have a carbon fee, they can be put with that border adjustment. They could put on as they enter the country. So that keeps us from being a disadvantage from other countries that fail to put a price on their carbon emissions. So that's what's known as a border adjustment. As I mentioned, 3 of them have no restrictions on regulations by the EPA. The others have a limit on regulations of greenhouse gas emissions alone, and have mechanisms that if these targets or goals are not met, they can those regulations can come back into play. As I said, 4 of them are bipartisan, and 3 of them are just sponsored by Democratic members only. So I guess one thing I just want to mention is to the difference between, well, what's the advantages of the carbon tax or carbon fee as opposed to cap and trade. And one of the things that I think, especially on a national level, that other people have mentioned as well, especially when you're talking to expand something on a national level, it's much simpler to do a straight or to do a tax on emissions as opposed to having this very complex carbon and cap and trade structure that is that we've got in California. So it's easier to implement on a national level. And also there's a lot less loopholes. Like, people have complained that one of the things with cap and trade is it's some of those carbon credits can be illusionary. I heard one example given of, well, let's say I've got a big plot of land with a lot of trees, and I said, okay, pay me money and I won't chop down the trees. Well, what if you weren't planning on chopping down the trees in the first place? Have we really saved anything in terms of emissions? So there's less loopholes. As I said, it's straightforward. And so I have to say my own prejudice, preference, once again, as a volunteer or supporter of Citizen Climate Lobby, I do support HR 763. And one of the main reasons is because it is bipartisan. It is supported by Democrats and Republicans. And we know, regardless of what's happening in this election coming up, we're going to need Republican support. We're going to need conservative Democrat support. There's a lot of Democrats that are going to be reluctant to come on board with some of these bills unless they have Republicans join them. So the more we have a bipartisan bill, the more of a chance of actually getting passed and implemented. That's our goal, is to really get that bipartisan support. And one way to do that is to appeal to conservatives by saying it's going to be revenue neutral. That is, everything that is paid in goes back to the consumer. So, and actually, studies have been shown that actually most people in this country actually get more back than they pay in. So it's going to be good for the economy. It'll fund more jobs, and as I said, stimulate the economy through more consumer spending. So that's the various climate bills on the national level. I just want to finish off regarding some local bills. As I mentioned, we have coming up on November ballot, we have a couple measures coming in on Berkeley and Albany. And these deal with the utility tax, or the energy utility tax, particularly electricity and natural gas. So currently, utility customers are paying a straight fee, and that fee just goes into the general fund. And some climate activists locally, some of them connected with CCL, decided, hey, why don't we actually adjust the utility tax on people's bills so it actually reflects the costs of climate and costs of carbon in our energy sources. So they put, in Berkeley, it will be known as Measure HH. And as you can see, it will increase the tax, or the fee, from 7.5% to 10%, which would amount to a average cost extra for the average consumer, $4.33. And it will exempt low-income households. That's the people who are on the CARE and the FARA program. So talk about dealing with economic inequality. We have a whole segment of the people who will no longer be paying that utility tax. Low-income people will be actually having their tax reduced to zero. So that's a good argument in favor of it. And that money in Berkeley will go into the Climate Equity Action Fund, which will help to fund our climate action plan, particularly in terms of transportation. About 60% of Berkeley's greenhouse gas emissions are coming from transportation. So we can provide more infrastructure for bicycles, we get electric bikes, charging station for cars, things like that. So, and subsidizing transit. So those are the things that can be used with that money for the Climate Action Fund. Albany, as I said, also has one coming up very similar to Berkeley's. Their measure is DD. And once again, it will include exemptions for low-income energy users. So that's those two bills. And then just want to finish off once again talking about how this relates to the work of Friends. Some of you may remember back in last January, College Park Quarterly Meeting did consider and pass some climate-related minutes. One of the things that we were talking about is going back to our local meetings with some queries. Unfortunately, our pandemic has sort of put that on hold. Some meetings have responded to these queries back to the quarterly. Others have yet to do it, but I'm hoping that we will continue this thing. We had some really good sessions on the climate. As I said, last winter, we had a nice panel, and hopefully we will continue to continue to bring this to the forefront among friends. Should also mention that Strawberry Creek Meeting has also, back in April 2010, actually submitted a testimony for next revision on faith and practice on considering earth care. So we're definitely considering these things as friends, and hopefully we'll continue to consider them. And then just to finish up, regarding getting back to my Dr. Catherine Hayhoe, just want to mention that one of the things when people ask Dr. Hayhoe, what is the one thing that we can do as individuals to solve the climate crisis? What can we do as individuals? And her response is always the same. The one thing that we can do, the most effective thing we can do, is talk about it. So the more we talk about it every day to everyone we know, then it's going to become important. It's going to actually develop that political will that we need to solve the crisis. People don't talk about it, they don't think about it, and it just sort of is off the radar. So as I said, that's what I'm hoping that you will be able to do, that I might have given you some ideas today so that you can talk to other Quakers, non-Quakers, about climate and climate solutions. And I just wanted to also just leave, if you have some questions that you might want to consider to ask yourselves. We've come up with a few things. So such as, which is better? You think a carbon tax is better? You think a cap and trade system, which would you prefer? What would you do with the revenue that would be collected? Do you want to fund renewable energy? You want to fund infrastructure or energy conservation projects? Or you just want to refund it to the consumer, as I said, in a revenue neutral program? And also, what about the costs, the initial costs? What about the tax rate? Should we start with a higher rate than $15 or so per ton? Or should we have it start at low with a gradual tax increase each year? It's, as I said, things that you, well, maybe, yeah, I'm going to end this. Let's see, where am I? Anyway, I'm ending my presentation. But let's see if I can come back to my full screen. Let's see. All right. Switch, no. Okay, show, okay. I'm trying to get back to my full screen.
There's a green thing.
Close the PowerPoint. That might do it.
Yeah, quit PowerPoint. But I wanted to also stop sharing my screen too.
It's at the bottom. It should be a red.
I know. I'm trying to
red stop sharing. Yeah. It should
stop
sharing.
Oh no, it's at the top. Okay, great.
Okay,
it's at the top. So at any rate, thank you. That was my presentation.
Thank you. Good presentation.
Well, thank you. That was wonderful.
So at any rate, Mallory, do you have anything?
Please put, raise your hand with the blue hand from the participants list. Rick.
Got to remember to unmute myself.
Yeah.
And then lower my hand. Yeah, Tom, thank you for doing this. I confess, though, a certain disappointment. You know that I stepped away from Citizens Climate Lobby because I sensed that they were an organization for a different era. At this point, our own Quaker Earth Care witness, that the General Secretary is from Strawberry Creek Meeting, Shelley Tannenbaum, never uses the word climate change. It's a climate emergency. And certainly as we live our shared experience of the last 6 months and having unhealthy air bordering on hazardous air, having hundreds of wildfires up and down the West Coast, it seems to me that the word emergency is a more appropriate phrase. I also find it disingenuous, not of course by you or Citizen Climate Lobby, but by the emphasis on stopping the EPA from further regulation of greenhouse gas emissions while they experiment with a market-based solution. I tend to deem that as an opportunity of 10 years of having no regulation as, oh gee, the market system didn't quite work. I think there's very real possibilities with a tax, not the cap and trade, the tax, with it being an escalating progressive tax. As if they don't meet the standard, oh, it's not $52. I also believe that of the 6 examples that FCNL showed, I think the biggest one was White House from the Senate, with starting out at 52, meant to give a shock to the economy right off the. I mean, that's a big. It goes from 0 to 52 instead of 0 to 10 or 0 to 15. That's because it really wants to get all the companies' attention right away, and realizing they got to do something. And I feel that particularly those of us that don't have another 50 years of life ahead of us, which as I look around, I pretty much think that's probably all of us that are here. We need to do whatever we can now to make the world habitable for our children and grandchildren when they get to be our age. I am frequently in conversation with Charlie. Many of you know Charlie Blanchard, Shelley Tannenbaum's husband, who's a atmospheric scientist, and have been concerned about our planet becoming a Venus. If the methane gas, the frozen crystallets on the ocean floors, the methane gas locked into the tundra of the Arctic starts to be released, and it's 30 times more active than CO2.
Yeah.
How much rapidly that would be.
You remember James Hansen?
Yes, I surely do. I surely do.
By studying Venus. So that's
yeah, and Charlie has sort of reassured me that in our lifetimes, there's certainly virtually zero possibility of such a thing. The possibility is remote even over the course of a couple of centuries. However, if we continue to do the same old, if we, as you've seen, peak oil is, I know the grandson of the guy who developed the peak oil concept, Hubbard from the University of that's not our problem. Our problem is we'll lose the atmosphere far more rapidly than we'll run out of carbon-based fuels. Yeah. So what we have to do is incentivize in every possible way, ourselves by our own individual actions, our communities, municipalities, our counties, our states, our nations, and the world, to create stranded assets economically that essentially the oil conglomerates are looking at and are forced to confront tens of trillions of dollars that they're not going to access because they're going to stay in the ground. They're not available to them, and they're not available to the planet. And as long as we can get a carbon tax starting at a high enough pace, $52, and going up quickly, 6%, a BOP without in any way inhibiting the EPA to use evidence-based science to continue to regulate, then I think we got a win-win. This concern about bipartisanship, when in fact there's not a functioning Republican Party, but we have a party of cult right now. You need to think Mussolini in the 20s, and you're much closer to where you're at right now.
Rick, could we make sure that other people have some time to answer some questions?
Yeah. Let me just quickly I really hear you, Rick. Especially when we're talking about, well, we need to just go to the Green New Deal, and also as regarding regulation, like right now the status of regulation is Obama's clean power plant program is dead, and so that's what the reality is now. EPA is not able to regulate. So it's just acknowledging the reality. And yeah, I mean, if our country is ready to even go beyond, that's great, but we got to start somewhere.
Elections have consequences. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and the fact that we are, I think there are a lot of, and we're told this frequently, there are a lot of Republicans that would step up, but they need a little bit more encouragement. They need some more backbone. Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm just saying, Catherine, Paul, George, and Ronnie are up next for questions.
Yeah, but anyway, I as I said, I hear you, Rick, but as I said, I still see, at least that's where we're going to start is with at least trying to find some kind of a bipartisan support. Okay, let's go ahead. Yeah,
Catherine is next.
You've alluded to some of this in your talk, but you mentioned the three things we had to think about, which is better, tax and fees versus cap and trade, whether funds should go to projects or return to individuals, and whether to start with a higher tax or to start with the low and go up. And I wanted to know, having studied this in great detail, where you stand on these. It sounded like you prefer the tax fee versus cap and trade, but what about the other two?
Yeah, I think that as I said, we want to have not too much of a shock to the system. We do have it's our economy is so dependent on fossil fuels. I think it's going to take a while, but the studies that CCL has done has shown that if we engage in this course, we will meet our targets. And as I said, the average consumer especially low income people will be actually getting back more in terms of the dividend that they're paying in the tax. So yeah, my preference is to have the $15 a ton and slowly ramp it up to $10 each year. So
to start slow and go up.
Start slow and go up. And yeah, I definitely said, as I said in my talk, that a tax, I keep using the word straight, but a simple tax is a lot easier to administer than having a very complicated. Although it has been more or less working in California. I'm saying that the cap and trade program has not worked. It is working, but as I said, if you want to spend it out on a national level, I think it'll be much easier to implement the carbon fee and dividend.
And then, but what about the second one, the funding the projects versus using the money to fund project versus directly returning it to the consumers?
Yeah, I think that, one argument that, about its total return to consumers is using that some of that money for displaced workers. And that's one of the things that probably if we were going to get union support, that might be a factor. Although a number of unions, including my own, is currently supporting 763. I should also mention that 763 has a number of co-sponsors in the local area, including Barbara Lee and such. So it does have support from our our local Congress people, but yeah, I would say in general, if we're going to get the broadest amount of support, especially from more conservative Congress people, not growing government, keeping government small is their focus. So returning to consumer would keep that money from growing government.
Paul is next. Paul, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
I was muted. Yeah. As far as the Republican Party and conservatives not growing government, that's completely fallen by the wayside in the last few years, as we know, by watching that. But what I'm concerned about is on the enforcement side, the way in which Trump and the Republicans have been able to disable many of these regulations without even needing to bring them to Congress or to the Senate, and whether we need to build into these bills now an incentive to go back to our democratic form of government. And the other thing is the inspector generals have been fired and dropping out like flies. So how do we deal with the political aspect of all these things that sound very nice but can so easily be disabled by the more recent philosophy of the strong executive?
Mm-hmm.
What do we build into these bills?
I hope I didn't try to give the impression that I was thinking everything was going to be nice and easy.
Well, but I mean,
because it's not. We're in a really bad situation.
What I'm asking is whether we can build into these bills the necessity for these the checks that happen, or the regulation that happens to go through regular congressional checks and regular inspector general reports and things like that, which we haven't had. Seems like most things have evaporated just like that, based on what our government has done.
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you, except that that's one of the reasons why we got to get out and vote. And, as we've seen, the Supreme Court has become a big issue, and it should be, because once again, a lot of these, if you're going to enact regulations, they're going to be challenged in the courts, including the Supreme Court. And what kind of makeup of that court is going to be very important when these regulations are challenged. As they said,
that's so we're going. Yeah, it's just that we're going to have to restore the confidence of the American people and the voters in the ability of government to function in that way. It's a general philosophical statement, so we can go on from that. But I just feel that the confidence of most people in the government to do things that they say they're going to do is very low on all sides.
Yeah, I share your concern.
Okay, so we have George, Ronnie, then I'm putting myself on the list, then Sarah and Carl, and then Mark.
George, you're muted. Still muted. Still muted.
I'm sure I'm being stupid, but I don't understand Berkeley's measure HH. A utility tax presumably means I would have to pay more for my PG&E bill, and how would that cause less CO2 to go into the atmosphere?
Okay. Well, as I said, the city of Berkeley has a climate action plan, and so what this basically would do would be create a fund for funding that climate action plan. So it would work similar to the soda tax, if you remember the soda tax that came on the ballot, there's a citizens commission that sort of administers the revenue that comes in and uses it, and it will be audited. So the city auditor's office will be in charge of auditing, make sure that the money is well spent and isn't being wasted. But basically, as I said, they would look at the various parts of the climate action plan that needs funding. And right now, with the cities, with the pandemic, the city budget is really hurting. The revenues have really gone down. So this would be a good source of revenue for the city to replace what we've lost. And as I said, funding those things, as I said, 60% of our emissions are regarding transportation. So just funding things like bus lanes and charging stations, things like that, that could definitely help reduce our cities, our local areas' emissions. Does that answer your question?
Well, it doesn't convince me. The soda tax was very simple. The idea was if they paid more for Coke, they wouldn't drink so much. But this is evidently, if I pay more, I have to have faith that the city government will somehow figure out a way to help it. I dare say it will, but it's a very complex logic. Thank you. Yeah, it does.
Okay. Well, you might want to go to their website and check it out. But Citizens Climate Lobby of Alameda's chapter is supporting it. As I said, it was actually drafted by some people in CCL.
Yeah.
Ronnie is next.
Thank you. Are there any of the 7 bills, Tom, that you don't want to see take place? Is there anything there's an opposition to, or is it support of all?
At this point, I'd be able to support any of them.
Thank you.
They basically have the same goal. As I said, some of them, as I said, are a combination of returning money to the consumer, either through, it can either come back as a dividend, or it can go to reduce other taxes, or it could go into, as I said, projects, energy conservation, whatever, anything that'll put a price on carbon and get us onto the path of reducing our emissions, as I support.
So I'm next on the list, and I have a comment, and that is, it's practically the end of this congressional session. So these bills would have to be reintroduced. Mm-hmm. And Representative Carbajal, who was one of the originators, along with FCNL, by the way, of the ARC coalition, the Carbon Solutions Caucus, was defeated in the midterm elections. And Representative Rooney, the other prominent Republican who really has been strong on carbon pricing, is not running this time. He has been pushed out because he wasn't willing to kiss Trump's ring all the time. Mm-hmm. So bipartisan remedies and bipartisan agreement around these options is going to be narrowing. And, I think some of these are going to fall by the wayside. And so, we're going to have to, the exact type of option and, policy option within carbon fee types of policies are going to have to be, weighed again, once the new Congress has been seated and stuff. But it just means things are going to get more difficult in terms of bipartisanship. As the Republican Party moves further to the right, and there are hardly any moderates left, mm-hmm. is the reality. Sarah, and then Carl, and then Mark.
Hi, Sarah Terrell from Berkeley Meeting. So sort of a comment, I guess. I'm a little confused why some of these are supporting is putting money towards highway infrastructure. I would think that supporting highways and and driving in our cars would be the last thing we'd want to do. It's just kind of a comment. One question is about the means of measurement. We're talking about, measuring the carbon output and how well it's controlled. Are these means of measurement standardized and agreed upon across the industry, or are there going to be like your example with the trees? Are there going to be people who say, "Well, I planted lots of trees, so I get credit," kind of a thing? Yeah, I don't know how valid that is. And I also, in the one that you were for favoring, the 763, I wasn't too keen on the idea of the exclusion for military uses of carbon fuels, but maybe that'll make it easier to get through. So maybe we have to put up with that. I don't know. I think that's all I had. I know we're probably getting out of time.
That has been one of the issues that have been brought up, is the exemptions. And let me just pull up a document for myself. It's basically it's a refund of carbon costs covered by fuels used by the military. And as I said, it's one of the ways, and also agriculture too. Anything that's taxes fuels used by the agricultural industry are exempt as well. One of the arguments that FCL is making, or not FCL, CCL is making, is that the U.S. military has been aggressively pursuing alternative sources of energy for strategic and environmental reasons. And so it's expected that they will continue to go on that path as well. One thing is the military has discovered that one of the big national security issues that we've got is the climate crisis. So the military understands that this crisis is going to exacerbate tensions around the world, and we need to get on top of it. But you have that is a good point, because they said, I think that's one of the things that is being used to try to get bipartisan support. Was there another part of your question that I was trying to?
The question was about the measurement for the accountability.
Oh, the measurement, yes, yeah. Is
that standardized and agreed upon?
Yeah. I don't know, Mallory. Do you have? I think that it's pretty much they can figure out the carbon content of fuels and use that to assess how much the tax to apply. That's correct, right?
You mean so taxing coal, gas, and oil as close to the source as they can get, and measuring the emissions, so they're taxing basically the emissions that'll result?
Yeah. Does that answer your question? That they they've had that calculated. In fact, that's how a lot of carbon calculators are figured.
So they calculate it based on the actual fuel used,
or extracted.
Extracted.
Okay, so that's straightforward. That's not something you can do much mumbo jumbo about. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Carl?
Almost anything that recognizes that there is a climate crisis, and yes, it's going to be disruptive to the economy. It's already being disruptive to the economy, and will get more so over time. But another question as to how we deal with the revenue, and that is like some of these have provisions for displaced workers and displaced towns. Whole towns have based their economy on, for example, coal mining. And some kind of provision for that. It's bad enough to tell people that no, the basic source of your economy is going to disappear. It's worse if you tell people you've got to just basically it's tough. Another question on who is being impacted, though, and this is sort of to everybody. I follow a website called wildfiretoday.com. It is very thoughtful about major wildfires, and that site, of course, has been very busy over the past month or two, and I certainly haven't read everything that's there. But among those who manage the fighting of wildfires, there is a lot of, most but not all of them, are aware that the climate crisis is a major reason why fires are happening. But the need to spend more money on fighting fires, fighting wildfires, and to spend much more money on removing flammable fuels in the sense of shrubbery and such, that these are fuels for wildfires. That's going to take a lot of money, and the climate crisis has been building a long time, and the problems with mismanaging wildlands has been growing a long time. And in order to do anything to seriously deal with the wildfire crisis, it's going to have to happen faster than we can dial back the global crisis of CO2 buildup and other greenhouse gas buildup. So this is just Carl saying something that's on my mind, not really expecting an answer. I would say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Wildfiretoday.com is a great website.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So we've got two more people. We've got Mark and then Dirk. Mark? Can you get yourself unmuted? I can't unmute you. I can just ask for you to be unmuted.
Maybe Dirk could go first.
Yeah, we'll. Oh, here we go. Here we go.
All right, great.
Well, first I wanted to thank Tom. He's clarified for me a number of the practical things that I'll have to do to make choices about things which will actually be on the ballot, and I will support some of those in the same way that I will be supporting Joe Biden, without the belief in either case that I am doing something that's appropriate to the urgency of the climate crisis. And so I wanted to say that while those things are realistic choices that we're going to have to make, I do wanted to raise the issue of how it is that we have a discussion on what the options are for what we're going to be doing about the climate crisis without a mention of the role of Exxon and Chevron and the amount that is being subsidized for a failing industry who are being bailed out by their COVID grants to be able to keep going and to keep funding the political base for which even a progressive state governor like Governor Newsom will not address the fracking issue or the issue of new oil leases. To me, the options before us are having to choose something which will grant exemptions for the military, which is, despite its protestations of being concerned about global warming, is still the largest polluter. To me, it seems that we have we have two different agendas. One is to do what is practically possible in the electoral legal system, and the other thing is to address those aspects of the Green New Deal which are really essential if we're going to pass on to our kids a livable world.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Good points. And yeah, and what you're talking about was sort of out of the scope of what I was assigned to talk about, or what I accepted to talk about. But I definitely agree that we should be, and CCL agrees too, you definitely get rid of any subsidies. We shouldn't be subsidizing fossil fuels, you know, and we certainly shouldn't be exploring for energy resources at the detriment of the environment, whether it be our water, our air, our land. We need stricter controls on that too, and I definitely support those. But yeah, you got to make a good point.
The exemption for agribusiness really leaves out a tremendous hole on what's causing the atmosphere to decline.
Okay, and Dirk, our last question, I think.
Well, maybe not. My concern, Tom, and thank you for your research and presentation. We all need to learn more about this issue. My question is, you are presenting me with, I guess, 6 options here. You want me to call my congressman. You want me to make up my mind and call congressmen and senators on what I think is the best way to go. Is that correct, Tom?
Well, that's one of the actions you can definitely take is call Barbara Lee and thank her for supporting, for the action she's done. As I said, she's co-sponsored 763. She's definitely supportive of us, climate activists, and thank her for what she's doing. The same with Kamala Harris and Dianne Feinstein. So yeah, definitely call them if you have the specific bills that or ideas that you want to them to know about. Let them know. Thanks.
Well, my next observation is that now we are the biggest exporter of oil, I have heard. Have you heard that also?
Yes, that is correct. We've gone from an oil importer to an exporter, yes. Or energy exporter.
We certainly
You're talking we nationally?
Yes, we nationally need a bill that says, no, we will not export oil.
Right, Dirk, just a factual clarification. We do now export oil. We are not, by a long shot, the world's largest exporter. We've gone from an importing nation to an exporting nation. We are the largest producer of fossil fuels, exceeding Saudi Arabia, Iran, etc. But we are not the world's largest exporter.
No. Yeah, thank you for that clarification.
Okay, so any other questions or comments? I would say, Tom, this was great. And if this was your first talk, I thought you did an excellent job. And thank you so much for pulling all this information together. Great job. I found it really, really informative. I want to make a couple announcements that Friends Committee on National Legislation has I think it's bi-weekly newsletter under the greenhouse or in the greenhouse, just about climate emergency issues. You can sign up for that, and they have periodic alerts that go on. Also, we are having the Quaker Vigil for Democracy is the second and fourth Fridays. That means it's coming up on this Friday, 4 p.m. at the old Berkeley City Hall, and on October 4th at 7 p.m. Social Environmental Action Committee is going to be sponsoring Jim Lindbergh, the head lobbyist for Friends Committee on California, talking about the ballot propositions and their recommendations, FCL's recommendations on the California ballot propositions. So you'll be seeing more about that, but we want to open that up to everyone in the quarter and Friends Church and anybody else. So you'll be getting information about that. Tom, do you want to make any last comments? And before we go?
Just thanks everybody for listening, and thanks Ginny for recording. We'll see how we can get that distributed. I did upload my PowerPoint, which is the first one I've made, to Google Drive, so I can share that URL with people as well. Probably do it through the both meetings IO groups as well as the Berkeley Friends Church announcement list. Thanks again, I really appreciate it.
If you like, we can put the PowerPoint and the recording on the Berkeley Friends Meeting Social Justice website, if you would like.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'll do that. Okay. Again, thank you, Tom, very much for your talk, and for Mallory for helping out and monitoring the chat.
Thank you, Tom.
Take care, everyone.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Tom.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Thank you. Bye.